Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing the article The Square, as written by Worshipful Brother R.E. Salmon.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Hello, my name is Matthew Appel, and I am one of the hosts here of the Working Tools Podcast, along with my compatriots. We have Worshipful Brother Steve Chung, who is a member of Prince Charles Lodge 153 in Kelowna, British Columbia. Worshipful Brother Jarrod Dunham of Penticton Lodge 147 in also British Columbia. And Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth, who is a past master of King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And today we'll be discussing an article that Steve picked out called The Square. We got it from Norm McAvoy, who's a friend of the pod, as they like to say, and has been on a couple of times discussing his articles. He repurposed it from, it's from the Grand Lodge of Saskatchewan by Worshipful Brother R.E. Salmon. I'm choosing to pronounce it Salmon because that's how it's spelled, but if someone knows differently, please let me know and we can correct it. And it is an article about the square as is used in Masonry versus other places, I suppose. So, well, take it away, Steve. What was your thought with the article, and what did you think of it?
Well, it was interesting because it talks about operative and speculative aspects of the symbol in Lodge, and I never even thought before, but our square on our Bible is got one leg that's longer than the other, and it's marked out. But this document says that's not the way it's supposed to be. Like its first paragraph, the French Masons have almost universally presented it with one leg longer than the other, making it a carpenter's square. But American Masons, while generally preserving the equality of the length of the legs, unnecessarily marked its surface with inches, thus making it an instrument for measuring length and breadth, which it is not, apparently. So it is simply the trying of the square of a stonemason, which has a plane surface and the sides of the legs embracing an angle of 90 degrees. And it's intended only to test the accuracy of the sides of a stone and to see that its edges are subtend and the same angle, is what it says. So it is kind of interesting how it's evolved or innovations happen in Freemasonry, where this thing has been marked up since. So I thought, well, that was kind of a different thought of should it be or shouldn't it be? But I've never been a carpenter, and I've never been a stonemason, so I don't truly know the real uses in their worlds either, right? So, but I thought it was a good story to throw out there and discuss.
Are you French based?
No.
That was interesting to me. I thought I was curious why. I know that you use the long or oblong square, or elongated square. The whole idea of oblong squares was a whole nother thing I was researching the other day. We talk about oblong square versus a perfect square. That could be another show.
Yeah.
But if it's interesting that you use the oblong square, because I know you use that for your past master's jewel, correct?
Yes.
And so I was curious, if you're not a French-based lodge system, I wonder how you adopted that, or maybe we didn't want to be French, and so we decided to go away from that. I don't know. Do you know, Matt?
I'm willing to bet that some fraternal supply company at some point made squares, and somebody said, "Hey, we need a new square for the Bible," and ordered one. And I don't know how to say this kindly. I feel like a lot of Masonry, and I'm not at all pointing at Steve's lodge or anyone else's lodge or anything, But I feel like Masons have a tendency to attribute more meaning to things like that than they necessarily were originally had. Like the whole square apron debate in Washington here, rectangular aprons versus the swoopy apron, or the rounded eight corner aprons. I feel like people come up with reasons sometimes for the way things are that are not, it used to be just easier to manufacture rectangular aprons. So, but now we have a reason for it. Now there's tradition and symbolism involved that wasn't necessarily there to start with. So, sorry, I'm dragging us off topic. But
I think it's a good point, because you're right. If it probably was just somebody said, "Hey, I need a square," and so they made one, and now magically all U.S. lodges have marked squares. Maybe. I'd be curious to know what other Grand Lodges or other jurisdictions, what they have for their square.
So, and I think you could go from lodge to lodge and find, even in Washington, and find 5 different kinds of squares used, not just the 3 that are pointed out here.
Steve, do all of your lodges have the same elongated square, and do they have markings on them?
Everyone I've seen does, but actually, no. There was one lodge I went to, and their square was, well, their square and compass set was very plain, just very rough looking metal. But it was still one leg was longer than the other. I don't know, Jarrod. What do you know? You shake your head on those.
No, the 3 lodges that I've belonged to all have had squares of equal length, where the arms are equal length.
And are they marked?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were marked.
And are all your I know in Canada they have multiple standard works, if you will, right? So are all of the standard works, do they all have the same symbolism and tools that they use? So do you use the same square and compass for all of the lodges that meet?
There's 3 major and 1 minor, because there's only 1 lodge in BC that does the Australian work. But there's the majority of the lodges here in BC do either Canadian or what we call the ancient. And from most of what I've seen is the square and compass are the same between Canadian and ancient. And I would hazard a guess to think that those lodges in BC that do emulation, the square is probably, it's like the same meaning and everything.
Actually, I think you're right, Jarrod. Most of the lodges have the squares on the square and compass that they put on their volume of sacred law is all the same proportion, but most of the ones I've seen are marked with measurement.
Yeah. I can interject another tangent here, is that I know that it used to be in the 19th century, the past master's jewel of some lodges used to be hung from a carpenter square, but not on an angle. Like ours is hung like this. And the ones that are hung on a carpenter square are actually at a right angle. So it looks different from our modern past master's jewel. So do some lodges use a different square? Yeah. Does it matter? No. I mean, a 90-degree angle is a 90-degree angle. Whether you're using a carpenter square or a not carpenter square.
But there must be meaning, Jarrod. There must be meaning.
I don't know. The only other, the one square I know is a tailor square for making patterns and stuff, and I believe it's usually, we can get 2 of them. There's one that has equal arms and one that might have a leg or arm, but it's just used for measuring a right angle, and it does have measurements on it, but that's for usually, I believe, used for calculating out your proportions for doing direct measurement patterning. But that's like a totally different tangent.
I will add that the square that is visible behind Jarrod of the Working Tools podcast logo, no markings, The square that is visible behind Steve, that is something he pulled off the internet, I suspect. It looks like it's marked to me, so I don't know. Oh, there you go. And David's got one too over there, so I can't tell what's going on.
I think mine's
there.
marked as well. I think it has little tick marks on it.
The only one that's right is the one that in our logo is unmarked.
And a quick Google search, so if you assume that Google gave me the right answer, the seal or Grand Lodge seal that I could come up with for both BC and Yukon and Washington have a square and compass in them, and neither of which has any markings on it. So, for what it's worth.
I'd have to think about that now. It's going to cause me on tomorrow night when I go to lodge to practice to see does our square actually have markings on it, or is it just ornate?
I actually know for a fact that our lodge has more than one, and I know that one of them has markings on it, one of them does not. So
interesting.
So,
go ahead, Steve.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to ask the same question. So if we're talking about the square thing and whether it has markings or not, what's the purpose of it?
To see that that a stone is true and square.
Why is that
its only purpose.
Why is that important? Why is that important?
Well, if you don't have your stones to be square, then how are they supposed to fit nice and tightly together to, make a good building?
But Matt said we could just use extra cement last time we talked. He said just use lots of extra cement and the stones magically fit. Get that rough ashlar in there, man.
Well, I'm sure that would work in the short term, but if the work was ever tested, that might fail.
So, right. But why did who had the squares?
The tradesmen, the workmen.
Did they?
In 1830, the workmen rebuilding the bridge near Limerick, Ireland, found an old corroded brass square and inscribed the words, "I will strive to live with love and care upon the level by the square." Dated
go back further.
1517.
Go back further.
Dated 1517. Right? So it would have been a workman. Stonemasons.
In masonry, though, don't we say that there's only one person that had the square? Or one level of person, I guess not one person, but one level of mason would have the square?
Well,
Jarrod, you're smirking. You're not answering, but you're smirking. You can't see that. You can't see you smirk on Spotify. You got to answer, man. It adds content to the YouTube watchers, but sometimes I think people that watch YouTube, they just put their phone down and they don't listen either. They don't watch either. They're just listening. But so who had the squares? Wasn't it the Master Masons?
Well,
because the Fellowcraft didn't have them and the Enterprise didn't have them, did they?
Well, it says here the candidates for the Fellowcraft degree hope to attain the privileges of the degree by assistance of the square. So the lodge and Fellowcraft degree is duly opened on the square.
But what's the job?
Candidates are obligated within the square. So
according to our rituals, though, what's the job of the Fellowcraft?
The job of the Fellowcraft.
What's their duty? I mean, their duty it's to create the stone. And yes, they may have needed a square to check, or were they, the master though had the master square, had the official square that he would check. So was he checking the work, or was he checking the workman's square?
Good question. Depends on the funny work you do. That's a good question.
I think you're right. I think the Fellowcraft are the ones that had the squares because they were the ones that were hewing the stone, right? They were making it square. They were making it perfect.
Yes.
But then they would have to go to the master each day or at some point every week or whatever the ritual was to make sure that their square was accurate. Right? They would measure their square against the master's square to make sure it was actually square. So when they were doing their work, it would be square. times c squared.
That makes sense.
And then
That makes sense.
now Matt's smirking and he's not responding either.
I'm just trying to think if that appears in our ritual.
I don't think it's in the ritual specifically, but again, there's meaning in everything, isn't there?
Then the past Grand Master's got the wavy line. What is that? What do you do with that? I don't know.
The ot thingy.
I don't know. It looks like a sine wave.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that. Isn't it vertical? Isn't it vertical? I thought that was vertical. The ot was vertical. Because I made a embarrassing move. And I said to most worshipful Al Jorgensen, who was my mentor, I said, "Hey, that's a cool pin. What's that?" He kind of said, "Oh, it's the past Grandmaster's pin." I was like, "Oh, I wanted to go crawl under a rock. I should have known what that is." And
Can I get one of those on eBay?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
So the assertion of this article is that the Brother Salmon, worshipful Brother Salmon, who wrote it, that essentially there are three kinds of squares in the world. That there's the ones where the two legs are not of equal length. There's ones where they're of equal length, but there's gradations upon it, and there's ones where they're of equal length, and it's just plain piece of metal, presumably, or wood, with nothing else on it, which respectively would be a carpenter's something else and mason's square, I guess, right? What was this? Did he ever classify the second one? I can't remember him saying exactly what that was.
I don't think he talked about what the second one actually was, just that it had gradation.
I can't. I guess, as has been said earlier, I can't imagine why. I can't, in my head, see a master walking through the work site and seeing someone using a square with gradations on it and going, "Get that thing out of here! That is, you're fired."
So, Matt, do you all do we call it down here the past master's degree or secrets of the chair? Do you do that in your district?
Yes.
A form of that. And Steve, you have that. I think you called that. You do that as part of your. I think Jarrod said it too. You do that as part of your installation, right?
That's right.
And without giving too many secrets away, isn't there a part of that degree that talks about the name or the password? I think technically is as a particular word, and doesn't it signify stone square? It does in our. Does it? Do you remember that, Matt, as part of your ritual? I think I hear it because I hear Michael, Very Worshipful Michael, that was one that has been doing the degree for 30 years or 40 years, whatever, and he emphasizes that part when he says the password, and he says, and it signifies stone square. I thought, oh, okay.
I don't remember that verbiage in.
Yeah.
No,
I don't think, no.
It could be the bad mouth to ear problem we have down here with the adjustment of the non-standard work, because that's not really standard work down here.
Or it could just be the fact that we only do a board of installed masters when it's a newly installed master, and that doesn't happen very often up here.
Yeah. So there's the physical thing that we call this square that we're supposed to use, but what does it mean philosophically? Why do we use a square as an instrument? And silence. We need some background music, Matt. Do 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 do.
I don't know. Why do we use a square as an instrument?
Is it not to make sure that our actions are square with each other and that we do things on a true basis with each other? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting nods, but no yeses.
I've always sort of wondered about that a little bit, but I can see that they talk about the compass and drawing the circle and the point within the circle, and there's all sorts of cool symbolism there and stuff. The square always seemed a little bit less, I don't know what the word is, obviously along those lines.
I think he alludes to this in the article, if I remember correctly. But and in general, when we talk about treating people on the square, well, he gave you a square deal. That's kind of a slang term. It's kind of out of favor these days, but it's still an old phrase. And that's direct, what we've been told is direct descendant of Masonic ideology of using the square. And so what does that mean? If somebody gets a square deal, I mean, they have had a fair deal. They didn't feel like if you want to consider we don't, in a lot of times you don't think there's not a win-win in something, but maybe a win-win is considered a square deal.
Well, in here it says it refers to the ancient Egyptians' word for square was used as a meaning of just and proper. To the non-Masonic public today, a transaction is noted to be on the square when it is honest and above board.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Yeah. Yep. However, drawing the square remains a symbol of morality, of truthfulness, of honesty, as it has been recognized as such both within and without Masonry for centuries. I can agree with that.
If you want to go down another rabbit hole, do you use the quadrant up there in Canada?
The quadrant.
The U-shaped
sort of that's in our past Grandmasters jewel. Instead of it is so, but that's the only time I think we have it.
In our jurisdiction. The square is supplanted by the quadrant. So as a past master in Washington, you don't have the square, but you have the quadrant. And the quadrant is marked. And according to our ancient custom.
Yeah, because it's isn't it a 60 degrees? So it's like
it proves the angle 60 degrees, which is the right angle, or the angle of the equilateral triangle. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Equilateral triangle. And of course has the three-sided, lots of meaning in Masonry. Mm-hmm. But and then correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, when the past grandmasters and even the deputy, the square is returned. So in our jurisdiction, the deputy and grandmaster have the compasses, square, and the quadrant, but the item in the middle changes from G to a star to the sun.
Interesting. So for Freemasonry's .bcy.ca, it has the compass and the square, and it's set at 36 degrees. Although there will always be those who search for the hidden meaning, there can be little question that this depiction is the result of aesthetics and the jeweler's art rather than of numerological significance. Compare this to the jewel of a past grandmaster, where the angle is set at 29 degrees. In the Pythagorean doctrine of numbers, 36 symbolize the male and female powers of nature united because it is composed of the sum of four odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, equaling 16, added to the sum of four even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, equaling 20, for 16 and 20, 36. It has, however, no place among the sacred numbers of Freemasonry. Right, but that art is still measured, and it is used for measurement, which is interesting. If the square is not supposed to be
36 degrees seems awfully narrow, and 29 even more narrow.
Narrow-minded people, man. Maybe to keep things within due bounds, it's got to be that much narrower of a measurement.
Huh.
I don't know. Interesting, though.
It's a good thing we have a disclosure at the beginning of the show.
Yes.
Our views are not Those are our Grand Lodges or concordant organizations. I don't know. That seems awfully narrow. I mean, it's not even 45 degrees, so it wouldn't even be half of a right angle. It would be pretty narrow opening. Right. I don't think I've ever seen a set of compasses in that narrow. Have you? Anybody else?
I believe acute is the word you're looking for.
Yes, very well. Very good.
Yeah, that's all I have on
it. Well, unless someone else has something pithy to add, anyone?
Well, I think the problem with the square is there really isn't a lot. There isn't a lot philosophically about the square. It's as far I've always thought it was pretty much one of the most in-your-face obvious symbols we have in Masonry, because the whole idea behind the square is it just measures one angle to make sure it's true. So, and
but why is it a symbol? We're not actually building stones. We're not building buildings. So why do we use the square? I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. What's the symbolism behind it for a Mason? We're not physically doing that. So
no, but we're making sure that all that we do is true. I mean, you guys covered it. It's the whole concept of the square deal is that it's a true up and up deal. I don't know. The squares. Square's always been. I think it's one of the least debatable. Is debatable the right word? I don't think there's a lot you can say about it.
Obviously, because we were stretching.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say. I think when I was saying that and I think that even the square deal and square being a good thing overall, generally speaking, is it's just a trick of language, right? If someone had said 400 years ago that round things were good, a circle was the best thing around, and so it's a round deal was a great thing, or a circle deal or something, would the square not be a symbol of Masonry? Or it seems very arbitrary to me. I'll phrase it that way.
Well, but it's not. Oh, you see, we should have recorded this because it's not. Because the whole thing about a right angle is that it's perfect. It is a circle can be because an oval is a circle, but it's slightly off.
An oval.
A circle's an oval.
No, a circle. It's the same concept as when we talk about the oblong. A rectangle is an oblong square.
A square is a rectangle. Mathematically speaking, a square is a variety of rectangle.
Right, but the thing is that with circles, when you talk about using a square and measure, especially when you're thinking about things that are correct, how do you know a circle that? Mathematically speaking, you can prove the proper the trueness of a right angle. You can't mathematically prove the trueness of a circle. You can artistically draw one, but you can't go through and 90 degrees being square. I don't know how to explain this. In my mind, it makes sense, but I can't get the words out of there to make it. I think there is something about square versus circle that makes it a better symbol. I just don't have the faculty right now to prove my point.
Okay. That is interesting. Enough. I don't know how you would, if someone handed you a circle, how you would demonstrate that it is a circle and not a almost circle, but that's really an oval.
Right. Because the only way to prove that a circle is perfectly round is by using a square
or compasses.
True. But you measure those compasses get measured on what?
A square.
Do they?
Yeah. You square in order to prove. I believe. Oh God, my math is. I believe the only way you can prove that a circle is perfectly round is through squaring it. But my daughters would be able to tell you this because they're fresher into math than I am at this.
Yeah, I was a math major, but that was 30 years ago. So
yeah, well, I mean, I was a math geek in high school, but now, no.
It appears that we have exhausted this admittedly short article, The Square by Worshipful Brother R.E. Salmon from the Grand Lodge of Saskatchewan. We'll have a link to it in the show notes, so please check it out and read it for yourself. And if you have any thoughts on the square as a symbol, or on our inane ramblings on the square as a symbol, please feel free to leave us a comment. Had a good conversation the other day with a brother on the Facebook that was, well, I found it interesting anyway. So anyway, the point is, please check it out and leave some comments, and we will be happy to converse with you on the topics. And with that, on behalf of Jarrod and Steve and David and myself, we want to thank you all for listening and hope that all is well with you. Goodbye.